Everything that we need to adjust for stitch length and stitch width on the Pfaff Creative icon is going to be found in the Stitch Edit menu. Now, this is not open all the time. It's only open when you touch it. Whatever you touch is green. So if I was in one of these other areas like free motion, then that area is green and I have different options. So depending on what you want popped up there, you can turn it on, turn it off. But for today, we're going to work with Stitch Edit. When we open that up, we are looking at what we can do to this stitch, the stitch that's actually been selected and is showing on your screen. Since this is a straight stitch, we do have the option for needle position. So normally this is stitch width if it was a stitch of side to side motion, but when it's a straight stitch, it's needle position. There's like 35 different needle positions, and yes, I have used every one of those because every time I want to get it just right, I can move it that small of an increment. That's a privilege. Not all sewing machine brands have that many needle positions. And when you have 9mm wide stitches, you want to be able to have that flexibility of lining it up exactly where you like it. As you see your numbers turn green, that means that you have done something to that stitch. Very easy to see. This one is your stitch length. So if we want to lengthen out the stitch, you do have increments all the way up to, on this one, 5mm long. And just a reminder that as you're changing these stitches, you can be over here sewing while you're changing them. So the needle can move for longer stitch lengths, shorter stitch lengths, needle positions, and stitch width, all while your foot is on the foot control, which is awesome. So let's just go back to, now let me show you a little quick trick. When you're on a straight stitch and you've played with it and you want to get it back to its default setting, go up to your stitch menu and reselect stitch number 1. Notice the numbers here go back to white, which means the default setting. Now I do want to just jump over to, we'll just do the zigzag for next. I'm going to kind of collapse that down so it's not in our way. That is one thing I love about this machine. I can keep my work area, kind of like my desk, cleaned up. It's not cluttered with icons or features and functions I'm not actually using at that time. Now for a zigzag, we have now stitch width, so we can make that wider or narrower, and we have length, so you can lengthen it out depending on what you're looking at. What you're seeing right here on screen is actual size. So you will be finding that when you stitch it out and you were to hold it up to that screen, that's exactly what it's going to look like. Try it and let me know what you think on that. Now on here there is one other option. I'm going to go ahead and set this back to its normal setting by reselecting stitch number 7. So over here where it says stitch width and we were able to make it bigger, there's right in the middle where the zigzag icon is, and that's stitch width. As a way to remember it, there's 2 little dots below it. One is green and one is gray. When you touch in the middle, it changes to another feature. So right now we can actually change needle position. So we're shifting this. Instead of it sewing in the middle, it's going to sew to the right or to the left. It's like justification. If you think of how you would type out a Word document, what that would mean. So we can actually shift this stitch to be stitching over here on this side. And that again is a luxury not all sewing machines have. But if you ever accidentally touch that when you thought you were touching one of the minus signs, you'll be moving the needle position and not the stitch width. So if something starts to move, maybe just come up here, reset everything, and then start again, because you do have that option. If you ever see, there's going to be a lot of places we're going to have those 2 little dots. So that means that there's something else that's going to happen in that same area. So if you choose it, it's going to toggle between, for example here, stitch width and needle position. Let's say you want to save this stitch as your default stitch. Touch and hold the stitch. And what is a default stitch? That means, so touch and hold, let the little pop-up come up on the screen. Touch save to default stitch, and whatever settings I've done, so if I've made that zigzag wider, longer, off to the side, now let me get off of this so you can see how this works. So I'm going to just go back to a straight stitch. So that zigzag is my new favorite stitch. I'm always using it. Maybe that's a decorative stitch for you. Maybe it's your buttonhole that you're always going to, and you want a quick way to access that stitch. So now that you come down to this little 2 square icon on the side of the machine, touch it, and then touch the straight and zigzag plus menu, and you go to the stitch that you have saved at those settings. It's right at your fingertips. So it's super easy to kind of go around. And let's say you don't need that stitch as your default setting anymore. Whatever that next stitch is, let's just say it's 16 for me. I'm going to just put that on screen, touch and hold, save as default stitch, and it will override the last stitch that was in that kind of memory of the machine. So awesome way to do it. When you need to go back to a straight stitch, touch the stitch menu, touch number 1, collapse this down, and start to sew.